So the other day I uploaded a quick comparison video between PSSR upscaling and FSR 4 upscaling in Marvel Spider-Man 2 on PS5 Pro and PC respectively. So I decided that that wasn't enough, so I went out and spent over $200 on a capture card and decided to record comparisons in a bunch of other games too, because I got curious. So I'm going to get right into the comparisons momentarily, but first I just want to give a really quick warning. I'm not Digital Foundry. I am nowhere near as skilled or as persistent at this as, say, Alex Battaglia or Oliver McKenzie, so there are some mistakes here. I wasn't able to perfectly line up the shots, and also you'll notice that I recorded both the PS5 Pro and my PC in HDR, and the way the recorders manage that HDR mapping to SDR is not the same. So you're going to see different color balances between PS5 and PC. That shouldn't affect the comparisons that I'm showing off. All the detail differences that you should be seeing here should not be affected by that, but just wanted to give that warning in advance. I didn't really notice the issue until after I was done recording, which I had spent all day doing, so didn't feel like going back and re-recording them. Anyways, let's get right into the comparisons. So we're going to start with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which was really the first game shown off for PS5 Pro that really wowed people with a massive image quality boost over base PS5, and yeah, it's definitely a lot better than base PS5, but how does PSSR compare with FSR 4 in this game? For this comparison, we're in versatility mode on PS5 Pro, and on PC we've cranked every slider up to max, and we've had to mod in FSR 4 using OptiScaler. Doesn't come natively with the game, so in the menu here it says DLSS, but OptiScaler pops up, and it's basically converting that to FSR 3 Plus and then FSR 4. Relatively easy to set up, but just something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind here is that for this comparison, we have FSR 4 locked to an input resolution of 1080p, which then reconstructs to 4K. It's 50% resolution scale on both axes here. The PS5 Pro, on the other hand, has a base input resolution of 1080p, but can go anywhere up to 4K, and it reconstructs to 4K from there, although usually it's anywhere between 1080p and around like 1296p or so. So just keep that in mind when we're making these comparisons, is that the input resolution on PS5 Pro is probably going to be a little bit higher than on my PC here running FSR 4, which may affect detail, but I'm actually not sure if it has a huge effect here. The first thing I want to show off in this still shot is something that I've noticed with pretty much all games with PSSR, and that's this inherent kind of film grainy effect that persists even if you have film grain set to off in the game settings. It's a little hard to see in this comparison shot here because the recording quality of pretty much any capture card is only so limited. I don't have an extremely expensive recording setup like the folks at Digital Foundry have, and yet even with that you can see kind of this grainy effect in this recording here. It's a lot more obvious in person, although I would argue that if you're at a TV viewing distance, you're probably not going to see it too much in this game. If you're at a monitor distance like I am, you definitely notice it. If we switch to the FSR 4 footage here, you can see that the image is perfectly stable, there's no grain effect whatsoever. So that is one thing that I fully expect to eventually see fixed, but for now, it's something that you'll see in PSSR games. Oh, and that weird artifacting on the foliage, that is not an upscaling artifact. I actually posted this comparison on Twitter the other day as a still image, and a lot of people were pointing out that artifact, but that's actually just the way this game renders foliage. It uses dithering to handle, it tries to use dithering to handle level of detail, but doesn't always work super well, and thus you get artifacts like this. You also see this very, very clearly with DLSS, especially when you mod in the Transformer model, and that's just a side effect of it reconstructing so much data and resolving so much data that you can see those artifacts a little bit more easily. Whereas maybe on base PS5, which the game was originally designed for, the game was so blurry that you didn't even see it in the first place. When we're in motion here, as far as the level of detail goes, I would say that both upscalers actually trade blows here. The input resolution is probably a little bit higher on PS5 Pro here, as I had previously described, but when you're talking about AI upscalers, that doesn't actually make a huge difference. If the input resolutions aren't wildly different, then they're oftentimes going to look pretty similar to one another. The major difference here comes from stability, particularly when we're at oblique angles with staircases or we have distant granular detail. We can see more aliasing and a little more breakup with PSSR, whereas FSR 4 is mostly stable. It's not perfect, but it's definitely a lot better. Comparison number 2 is going to be both The Last of Us games, both Part 1 and also Part 2 remastered. They're so similar that I'm just going to use footage from both. Out of all the comparisons we're doing today, this is probably PSSR's best showing compared to FSR4. They're both pretty close. FSR4, again, is marginally more stable, but PSSR was implemented very well here. On PS5 Pro, we're using Pro mode, obviously, which renders at 1440p and then reconstructs to 4K using PSSR. And on PC, we're using completely maxed out settings, and we're using FSR4 quality mode, which renders at 1440p and reconstructs to 4K. Unfortunately, both versions are over-sharpened. For some reason, the Naughty Dog engine cranks sharpening up to 10 anytime reconstruction is being used. This problem isn't on the base PS5 version, so I don't really know why this was done. So if the game looks over-sharpened, that's the reason. You can turn off sharpening on the PC version, but I tried to balance them on this one so that they're relatively similar. And I'm just going to play some side-by-side clips here, and again, there's not really much to say. This is PSSR's best showing against FSR4 in this entire comparison, whether that's because it was just implemented well, or because of the relatively high input resolution and the fact that, you know, it's not really being pushed too hard, there's no ray tracing, all the lighting is baked. Whatever the reason is, it was done very well here, and again, there's not really much to say. FSR4 is a little more stable, again, but I think both versions look really good. PS5 Pro's 60 frame per second mode, Pro mode here, looks a lot better than base PS5's performance mode for sure, so it's a great way to play the game. For our next comparison, we're actually going to go back to Spider-Man 2, but I'm going to do a couple of things differently this time. We're going to keep the PS5 Pro version in Fidelity Pro mode, which upscales from anywhere from 1440p to native 4K, and then if it's below native 4K, it uses PSSR to reconstruct to 4K. But in the PC version this time, rather than using FSR4 Performance mode, which again renders at 1080p and then reconstructs to 4K, we're going to be using Quality mode this time, which renders at 1440p and then upscales to 4K. But otherwise, we got settings maxed out on both of them, which again, it's not the exact same visual makeup. PC does push further than the PS5 Pro version, but I just want to make them both look their best. Again, our main focus today is image quality, not draw distance or ray tracing quality. So if we do what we did the other day and run up the side of this building, it's a little closer than last time. They both seem to do relatively okay here. I'd say FSR4 is just a little bit more stable. However, when we look over on the cityscape here, this is where the differences really start to show themselves. And again, I showed this in the video the other day. The PlayStation 5 Pro is rendering at a much higher resolution, but even with that, FSR4 was so much more stable. And nothing really changes here. Still the same. If anything, the gap is even wider now that we're rendering in a higher quality on FSR4 this time. What we didn't do last time was look at the title screen, so I couldn't get it to match exactly. For some reason the PC version doesn't just default to the title screen, it goes straight to file select, so couldn't get it exact, but our main focus is what's in the background. And yeah, you can definitely see that FSR4 is a lot more stable here on the title screen. And again, what you're seeing here pretty much translates to the rest of the game. Now, to those that are going to take personal offense at this video, that how dare I compare these, it's not fair, this isn't disparaging the PS5 Pro version of Spider-Man 2. It still, image quality-wise, looks much better than base PS5, and it really doesn't look that bad in a vacuum. It's just, I'm showing what kind of improvements we can expect from FSR4 over PSSR. We're going to talk about that later in the video, too. Our fourth comparison here is going to be Hogwarts Legacy. On PS5 Pro, we're running in performance mode, which renders at 1440p and then uses PSSR to reconstruct to 4K, and has ray tracing off. On the PC version, we have all settings maxed out, but with ray tracing off, and we have FSR quality mode turned on, which again renders at 1440p and reconstructs to 4K. This is another one of those games where we have to use OptiScaler to mod in FSR4. It's relatively easy, but again, just something to keep in mind. When stacking these two side by side, I actually think, yet again, the PS5 Pro version doesn't look too bad here. It's relatively stable, there's not too much aliasing, there's a little bit in terms of like distant detail, but it's not too bad. Again, FSR4 is definitely more stable, but if you're in a vacuum and you're not comparing them side by side, I don't think anyone's really going to complain too much about the PS5 Pro's quality here, with one caveat. If we look at foliage, especially foliage that's within shadowed and darkened regions, there's an inherent instability to it on PS5 Pro that just isn't there on PC with FSR4. I think this is some sort of problem with an early version of PSSR and how it interacts with certain types of ambient occlusion, because, again, it doesn't really seem to pop up anywhere except for the foliage. And just like every other game in this comparison today, PSSR does have kind of an inherent grainy look to it, and it's a little unstable, but again, if you're at a TV viewing distance, you're probably not going to notice it too much. But FSR4 doesn't have this problem whatsoever, so if you're at a monitor viewing distance, you can definitely notice it. I also did a really quick comparison with the Fidelity RT mode on PlayStation 5 Pro, which adds ray tracing, obviously, ray trace shadows and ray trace reflections, and it also ups the input resolution from 1440p to around 1728p. On PC, we turned ray tracing on for this comparison, but we left FSR in quality mode because the only other jump above that is to native resolution, and I wanted to give PSSR as many advantages as it could have. I would argue they're relatively close here. You can tell that the higher input resolution on PS5 Pro here is helping the reflections a little bit, but for the rest of the image, again, FSR 4 is a little more stable, but otherwise they're relatively similar in detail. But I figured some people would want to see the ray tracing comparison in this game, so here it is. Our final comparison today is going to be Jedi Survivor, and just like everybody else who looks at this game on a technical level, this was definitely my biggest nightmare for today. For one, you got a mod in FSR 4 to the PC version using OptiScaler. It's not too hard on this one, it's a little bit more involved than the other games, but again, it only took me a few minutes to do the full thing, but again, just something to keep in mind. And the problem with the PS5 Pro version is that it upscales to 1800p and not 2160p, which is full 4K. I don't think that's going to be a huge problem for the type of comparison we're doing in this video, but again, I could not get the input and output resolutions to perfectly match. What we did was we went for performance mode in the PS5 Pro version, which has kind of light ray tracing on in certain visual settings, and the input resolution is below 720p to around 900p dynamic resolution, and then uses PSSR to reconstruct to 1800p and not 2160p or 4K like the rest of the games on this list do. In the PC version, I couldn't get my custom resolution utility to work properly with this game, so I can't actually reconstruct to 1800p. We're going to have the full 4K 2160p as our output resolution for this one. And we're going to be using FSR 4 Ultra Performance mode, which renders at a locked 720p and then tries to reconstruct to 4K. And really, for both versions of the game here in this comparison, the image quality just isn't very good. Once again, FSR 4 is a little more stable here, but again, a little bit of an unfair comparison because we're reconstructing to 4K rather than to 1800p, so maybe that explains some of the stability here, but Occam's razor suggests that if FSR 4 is more stable in all the other games on this comparison today, then it's probably also just inherently more stable here, but again, both are pretty unstable when you're rendering from that low of resolution. Really, the game on PS5 Pro has a similar issue to Hogwarts Legacy, and that's that ambient occlusion on foliage just doesn't reconstruct properly with PSSR. It actually used to be a lot worse. What you're seeing now was after a patch where they added the most recent version of PSSR, and yet, as you can see, the foliage still splotches and has an unstable look to it. Now, if we look at FSR 4, foliage is also not super stable. It does not have this ambient occlusion issue. It doesn't look splotchy, but it does look pixelated and unstable, which so does PSSR. But again, it just goes to show when you're rendering from such a low input resolution, there's really only so much you can do when you're reconstructing from that. So that's it for the comparisons for today. I did miss some games, like I got a request to compare Alan Wake 2, and I'd love to do that, but I don't own the PS5 version. I don't really feel like dropping $40 on it just for one single comparison. But, I mean, if someone wants to gift that to me, or if I get it in the future, I might be more than happy to compare the two games, the two versions of the game. There's also other PlayStation games, like for example God of War Ragnarok. That was updated to support PSSR on PS5 Pro, and it also supports FSR 4 on PC. So I could do that comparison, but I don't own that game on either platform, so again, maybe if I get it in the future I can make the comparison too. Now, why did I make this video? Well, part of the reason is because I just find it interesting. PSSR and FSR 4 are both machine learning based upscalers that are designed for AMD hardware, but with completely different approaches, and I just wanted to see what the difference between them was. The second reason is because we actually know that the current version of PSSR is getting replaced within about a year with a new version of PSSR that is built based off of the neural network and training that was used for FSR 4. Now, the PS5 Pro has completely different machine learning hardware in it than the PC RDNA 4 GPUs, so they can't just directly port FSR 4 to the PS5 Pro. You wouldn't be able to see results exactly like this, but I'm curious to see what kind of improvements we'll be looking at, and maybe what we saw in this video was kind of a preview of what to expect for that new version of PSSR that's coming sometime in 2026. I also fully expect that PlayStation 6 will just natively support FSR 4 or FSR 5 or whatever AMD has at the time, so again, you can kind of get an idea of what to expect from that by looking at this. And finally, Digital Foundry, who are way better at doing comparisons like this than I am, have a ton on their plate at the moment. There's so many new upcoming games and hardware releases that I just don't think anyone on the team really has time to sit down and do a comparison like this. So I just decided to take it upon myself, since I've been wanting this type of video from them for a while, but I don't think they're going to be able to do it anytime soon, so essentially what you're getting is we have Digital Foundry at home with this video. So that'll be it for today. Thanks for watching. Definitely sound off in the comments with games you want to see compared. I might be able to get that to work out, or maybe even other comparisons you want to make. Like, for example, why did I get this $200+ capture card rather than just using the PS5 Pro's built-in 4K capture like I did for my Spider-Man comparison the other day? I could do a video like that if people ask for it, but at the moment, I haven't heard anyone mentioning the comparison, so maybe someday. But thanks for watching, and you guys all have a great rest of your day.